Awesome. And we are live. Fantastic. All
Awesome.
right.
It's just you two too. So
And it's us. All right. Fantastic. Okay. So I'll text you when we're wrapping up. All right. So this is the
You
Game Day 716 podcast. We are live with a little bit of a short episode today, about 45 minutes long, because we've only got one topic today, CJ. And I'm sure you know what we're going to be getting into. I'm sure all of the NFL world knows what we're going to be getting into. But before that, we'll introduce ourselves. I, as always, am Paul, aka PDubs, and this is
GamedayCJ.
Yes, and we are coming at you with a conversation about COVID-19 protocols, vaccine statuses heading into the 2021 season, and the huge bombshell that came out today from the NFL in regards to the new protocols that are going to be in place. Specifically, CJ, I want to touch on one of the biggest aspects of this at first, and that's going to be in regards to if there is an outbreak on any NFL team, and that outbreak is specifically with unvaccinated players, that if they can't easily move it around and fit it into the 18-week schedule this season, that the team that has the outbreak among unvaccinated players will forfeit the game, registering as a loss for the season, counting towards the playoff standings. Both teams will not get paid, and there will be financial burdens of the opposing team that will have to be covered by the team that has the outbreak. What is your initial thought upon hearing all this news today?
The way I look at it is that at the very least, you're going to make these players who feel as though they don't want to be vaccinated at least have to go out and put a little bit more time into the decision-making process, right? So like, as opposed to right now, you could say, and you can pretty much do whatever you wanted to do without much of a repercussion as far as team related. Now you might get ripped apart on Twitter or whatever for having a bad take or whatever, but for the most part, there's been no financial repercussions for people doing whatever they feel on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever, for the players, mostly. And now with this being put in place, these guys are going to have to go and really sit down and make a decision as far as, okay, if I'm going to keep this stance and this is what I'm going to go with, then I'm going to lose money and I'm fine with that. Or, you know what I mean? I'm going to do the research. I'm going to look into it a little bit more and I'm going to decide, okay, after doing that, hopefully you come to the decision like, hey, this really isn't that bad. This is what we should be doing. You know what I mean? To me, again, it's like they're trying to push for continuity across the league. And the only way that you're going to have a successful season is by having that. So, you know, the more people that are on the same page, the easier the season goes and the more likelihood we have of each team having a 17 game season.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. And one of the things I want to touch on first in regards to all of this is the fact that I am seeing a lot of NFL players that are clearly unvaccinated based on their comments now, that are making comments in regards to I'm rethinking the NFL. And right now, specifically, I'm talking about DeAndre Hopkins. I shot you over a screenshot of his tweet from earlier, which has since been deleted, by the way, in which he states he might be done with the NFL altogether if this is how it's going to play out. And here's what I have to say about this, right? You are having that stance now against the vaccine when you're getting paid millions of dollars to do this job. But there was nothing that was preventing anyone from saying, I'm not going to get vaccinated and I'm just going to choose not to play college ball. Because in order to get to this level, in order to get to this platform, you had to get vaccinated in order to get to school. Then you had to make sure all your vaccinations were in place heading into college to play college ball. NCAA has very strict guidelines in regards to that. And then now you're in the NFL and we're in the middle of a pandemic and you're going to die on the hill of, if this is how they're going to do it, if they're going to force me to do this, then I might reconsider the NFL. When you weren't paid, it wasn't a big deal. Now you're getting paid, and you would think that that would make it even less of a big deal, but it's more of a big deal. I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around this. What are your thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins right now?
When you sent me that tweet, you know, immediately, and then Ramsey afterwards, I'll get into that after. But when you first sent me that tweet, to me, it just, it seems as though wherever he's getting his information from is not credible, because if he was going about it the right way and getting, and that to me is the big issue between both sides, right? Is a lot of times people who, trying to think of how to word this, but people who put out information that might not be vetted or checked or anything like that, they put it out there and then they kind of just start to, other people just believe it. They'll read it. They don't need to check it. They don't need to do any of that. And it's getting to the point where, there's a lot of misinformation being spread around. And I think that's mainly his issue. And again, the same with Ramsey, you know what I mean? How his comment back to him was, oh,
Yeah.
I know 2 people that got vaccinated and they still have it, or they still got it, or whatever. And it's like, to that, yeah, it's not 100%. Nobody has ever came out and claimed that it will 100% protect you. But at the end of the day, you're doing the most you can to help yourself and other people. And so, you know what I mean? Like, anything besides that narrative to me is just either gaslighting, and they're pushing a false narrative to get tweets, to get whatever, or they're just misinformed. You know what I mean? So
agreed.
It's one of the two.
Agreed. So shout out to Todd, who just texted me a nice statement that was made by Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk. And it's this is his exact quote. After today's memo, every unvaccinated player who isn't a franchise quarterback or otherwise untouchable due to skill or cap reasons is at risk of being cut. And I kind of have to agree with that. I don't know that they would lay it out like that, because they could easily consider it conduct detrimental to the team. Because now with this new memo in place, what you're doing by not getting vaccinated is you are putting your entire organization at risk of getting a loss without even having a chance to compete. If you are the mitigating factor that creates an outbreak in the locker room. Now, hopefully enough teams have a vaccination percentage that's high enough to where there won't be a breakout that happens. And one of the things that the memo doesn't discuss, and this is going to leave things up to a vast amount of interpretation, and it's going to give the NFL plenty of wiggle room. They don't quantify what an outbreak is. They don't say that 5 unvaccinated players have to get it. They don't say that it's got to be 8 unvaccinated players. They haven't set that criteria. They've made a blanket statement that kind of gives them, it gives them a lot of wiggle room as far as how they want to consider this. Like, if there's an outbreak that happens, it's only 2 or 3 players. Are they going to consider that a full-on outbreak among unvaccinated players of a particular squad and then go through the protocols they've laid out? Or is that number going to be higher? I think that's something that a lot of people are going to question in the coming weeks as we head into the preseason here, which, by the way, we're only 2 weeks away from the start of preseason football. And this is going to come to a head one way or another, because even if the players that are like on the fence and now have this memo are like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and do it because I don't want to be that guy now. Like, I don't want to be the guy that costs my team a chance at a Super Bowl run because I catch COVID and pass it along to other unvaccinated players. Now, are there going to be vaccinated players that catch COVID during the season? Absolutely. But there's a lot of facts that are not being discussed when I see all these tweets flying around from the unvaccinated community. And here's the big one that I want to point out. Getting vaccinated isn't a COVID deterrent. And by that, I mean that getting vaccinated doesn't mean that you're not going to get COVID. That's not what vaccines do. That's not what any vaccine does. It doesn't completely eradicate your chances of getting the disease. What it's supposed to do is mitigate the spread. And to do that, it does it twofold. On one hand, it makes it so you are less transmissible with the virus should you contract the virus and you're vaccinated. The second part is the higher the percentage of vaccinated population, right? The lower percent that other variants will be introduced into society. And that's the biggest fear right now. And I kind of alluded to this before we went live today, and I'm going to reiterate it. I was having a conversation with my wife the other day, and I kind of went into a little bit more detail with her about what my personal issue is with unvaccinated people. And it's not that I look down on them. It's not that I think less of them. It's that they frighten me. And not from the stance of, I think you're going to give me COVID. That's not what I mean. we have come a long way in a year in regards to COVID-19. And over 70% of adults in this country have gotten that injection to ensure the safety of not only themselves, but their family and the rest of society at large. And my problem with the unvaccinated population right now is that they're looking at it as a my body, my choice type of thing. And I think that is the most ridiculous way to go about looking at this. And here's why, because a lot of those same people don't feel the same way about abortion. And I'm going to leave that way off to the side, not even dive into that conversation, because they're two completely different things and they shouldn't even be discussed in the same sense. And they just shouldn't, because getting vaccinated isn't about my body, my choice. You not getting vaccinated could have an impact on my family and my friends and the people that I care about. And that's where the line is drawn in the sand for me right now. It isn't so much that I think that you not being vaccinated is going to get me sick. It's that you not getting vaccinated might impact people that I care about, people that have done the right thing, that have gotten vaccinated, not just to protect themselves, but to protect your family too. So to DeAndre Hopkins, who, now we'll jump into this, who issued a tweet in response to Jalen Ramsey in regards to his girlfriend's brother, is in the military. He is vaccinated and contracted COVID still. Okay, great. But you know what? On average, he's going to give COVID to less people than an unvaccinated person will. So let's throw that out there right now, right out of the gate. So what's your response to DeAndre Hopkins and Jalen Ramsey?
Again, it's just it shows a bigger issue within the whole of the United States. I think, to pinpoint two people, obviously I don't really want to do that specifically, but you could definitely use them as a good gauge of what the opposite view is, right? So like, that's the argument, as you get it. And again, read the information, go through and actually do some research for yourself, and then you can make a decision as far as which way. But at least that point, you have all the information you need instead of basing it on half truths. Yes, we understand that people get COVID even when they're vaccinated. That's that happens, right? And we know that. And so, but what it matters though is, like you just said, how many people that one person that is vaccinated, how many people he's going to then spread it to, which is going to be a lot less than somebody that is unvaccinated. And so, the other argument is herd immunity, right? Because that's what I hear a lot too. And it's like, okay, but are we okay with allowing 5-10% of the population to just die? Because personally, I don't believe that. I don't think that is the way to go. I mean, not at this point. You know what I mean? Like, not at maybe hundreds of years ago. Maybe we never made vaccines in the first place, but we have, right? And so if we're going to, at that point, it was a good decision, and 2 years ago it was a good decision, then now it's a good decision. It didn't, their information on vaccination hasn't changed to the point where we can sit here and say, oh, wow, like we didn't know this 10 years ago. No, we knew this for the most part, you know what I mean? Like how these work and stuff like that for a very long time. Now, specifically COVID, obviously, no, we haven't, the strain itself, we're not as familiar with, but as far as vaccinations, they've been around for a while and they've worked for a very long time. And so
the technology has existed since SARS was introduced to the world. So like, that's a thing too, right? Like the fact that I hear this all the time, and I've seen Cole Beasley even mention something similar to this, right? That it's experimental. What part of it is experimental? What would you consider an experiment? Because to me, an experiment is something that you have no clue about. You're trying to test something out for one of the very first times. Would you consider an experiment something that we've been working on behind the scenes since SARS was around in the early 2000s? Because that's almost 20 years ago now. I don't know that I consider an experiment to last 20 years.
No, we had the foundation, the building blocks to be able to fight a disease like this, a virus like this. And we've had that. And so what made the vaccine easier to make? And that's another argument, is it was made so fast, right? But what made it that way, and what made it so it was able to be made quickly, was that we have already had the foundation to do it. Now we just needed the right combination of the variables that go into the vaccine to understand exactly what needed to be mixed which way to fight the virus the best. And so we've already had that foundation for a long time. So it wasn't like we needed to go through run a hypothesis and then test that hypothesis. And you know what I mean? Like, because that's true experiment. That's, you know what I mean? That's the true definition of experiment. Experimentation is going through 7 steps to then realize whether, okay, is this experiment true or false? And we've already skipped plenty of those steps by already having vaccines in place already. And so again, I just, it just blows my mind. I just truly believe that it's ignorance, and
a lot of it is.
What can you, really, what can you do about that? You know what I mean?
But a lot of that ignorance is being done unwillingly, like and unknowingly, right? Like so one of the things that I've noticed about this, and it even is standing true in the NFL right now, and that's the big point of this discussion today, is that like it's still not going away, right? Like no matter what anybody has done, this issue is still there, and it's going to get worse unless people wise up to it. So there's a couple points I want to make to spin off of that. And I want to speak directly to NFL players when I say this, because I've seen this in too many tweets, and I really, really need to hammer this point home. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say this. I'm not trying to be arrogant or make it sound like I know better than you. That's not at all what I'm trying to say here. And I'll put it as simply as I possibly can. The term "do your research" works both ways. And research isn't trying to find ways to prove yourself right. If you go into trying to research something, simply trying to prove your beliefs right, all you're going to come across is stuff that propagates your take on it, right? But if you go into your research trying to prove yourself wrong and you find yourself unable to do so, well, then there might be some validity to your beliefs. And that's how I approach research, right? So I'm going to take one small example that I've seen multiple NFL players in the last several weeks bring up, and it's the speed in which this vaccine has been created. Little fun fact of history for everybody. In 1969, the rubella vaccine was developed by Stanley Plotkin. Okay. He created the first successful MMR vaccine in just 2 years, and that was in the 60s. We're in 2021. How many computers existed back in 1969? Show of hands, right? Like, like how advanced was our technology back in 1969? Not very advanced at all. The internet didn't
compared to now.
The internet didn't even exist. And this man came out with a vaccine that we've all had, every single one of us. If you went to public school or you played college ball, you got these very vaccines that were created in 2 years. But your cutoff is the COVID vaccine took 13 months.
Yeah.
When we have 20 years of prior knowledge about coronaviruses, because COVID-19 isn't new. It's a new strain of an existing virus, just like every year a new flu strain comes out. It's not a new virus every year. It's a new strain of a virus we already are aware of. So the idea that a vaccine can't be developed that fast is hogwash, because we did it 60 years ago. 60 years ago, we created a vaccine in almost as much time as we created COVID-19's vaccine. Yet nobody back then was causing the ruckus we are today. And now we're talking about the NFL, which is a private organization, right? Like they are a business, and they're in the business of making money. And if their games do not go off as scheduled, then quite easily they lose money. So they're going to protect their business interests, just like my employer protects their business interests, right? My employer wanted people to get vaccinated in order to not wear masks in the office. Okay. It is their right as a business to put that in place, just like it's the right of Walmart to say you still need to wear a mask to come into our store unless you're vaccinated, right? Like they can create the rules as they see fit because they're a business and it's private property. It might be a publicly traded company, but that does not, like, it's not the same as public property. Like you don't have to wear a mask on your front porch because it's your property. But if the NFL or an organization, your employer tells you, hey, you either have to get vaccinated or you're not going to be employed anymore. New York State, especially being an at-will employment state, like they can fire you on that basis alone. Now, is it morally right? That's another topic entirely. Is it legally okay? Yeah, they are within their legal rights to do that. Now, if you want to turn away millions of dollars and not get vaccinated, that is your right. And nobody's going to tell you can't do it. But there's going to be consequences to your actions. And that's the part that people really tend to get caught up on. And all the hyperbole that's thrown around in regards to, my body, my choice. Disrespectful that we're using that for a vaccine, but a good chunk of the population literally is against that when it comes to a woman's body. So
Yeah. Yeah.
like
The same
I'm not
people
saying
who are advocating now to let people
generally
have free
speaking.
choice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, are the same ones that are now, you know what I mean, that 10 years ago had an issue with, yeah, same thing, you know what I mean, what women choosing what they want to do, right? And now because it fits into their narrative, it fits into what they want to, you know, put out there in the world, that now, and it happens, you know, Democrats do the same thing. I'm not just going to say that it's a right wing thing. It's a, you know, both sides do the same thing. And I think the biggest issue really though is not the fact that, like, you know, the information isn't there. I really just believe that when someone like you specifically, or someone like, you know, that feels how you feel, when you go to somebody who doesn't feel the same way and you bring them information, the way you view that is that you look at it like you're trying to help them and try to, you know, make them understand a little bit better. And you know what I mean? Just help them genuinely. I
Yeah.
believe that's what you're trying to do. But the way that they take it is that you're talking down to them and that you know more than them. And it has nothing to do with your tone. It has nothing. It's an insecurity thing where people feel as though they're just not as smart as you, and so they don't like you. And that to me is the bigger issue that's going on and dividing people. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 100%. When I was growing up, I used to look at football stars. Like I used to look at my favorite players as my role models, right? Like if when you were growing up, right, you and I, if we saw a professional athlete or a celebrity that had on a particular pair of shoes or drank a particular brand of soda or pop, for those that want to fight me for saying soda, we were gravitated towards that because we looked up to these people, right? And now the next generation behind us is doing the same thing with today's current stars. And I think that it's a very, very, very dangerous line to be walking on to even have a stance on this subject if you're a player. I think that all players should have done what they were doing before. Just no comment it all the way.
Yeah.
Because I would rather I'd rather them have nothing to say than something that's polarizing. But at the same time,
when it comes to the organization,
go
ahead.
Which and the message is coming down from the organizations. I mean, we've heard from plenty of
head
coaches.
When it comes when it comes to the organization, I don't care what your individual feeling is. To be honest, I care about the better of the organization. I care about the ultimate goal. You know what I mean? Which, and in my mind, you like, if you're not with us, you're against us. You know what I'm saying? So, and if you can't tell that this like what you're doing specifically is causing issues within the organization, or it's issues within the locker room, or dividing the locker room, if you cannot tell that, then you're disillusioned, and I don't really care to have you here regardless. You know what I mean? Because I think it's crazy. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't think this ever would have happened. Had this same, it never would have been allowed, right? And but now the players have found a voice and have found a way to be able to use that. And it's great.
Which I want them to do.
Right. And it's great when they use it for community outreach, or to help people, or to, you know, get certain views of their personal life out to people that might not have those same views. I'm 100% cool with that. But when you use that, what they fought for, what hundreds and thousands of players before you fought hard for, you know what I'm saying? When you use that as a way to either gain followers or give off misinformation, that's not what the point of giving you that opportunity was for, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's another point made in regards to the NFLPA, right? Because one of the thoughts with this whole memo is that the NFLPA would they eventually try to fight against it. The problem I think we're going to see is that a majority of the NFLPA and a majority of the players all across the NFL are already vaccinated, and majority rules, right? So you're going to be hard pressed to be in the 30 to 20% range of players that aren't vaccinated currently, that are trying to make a stand to say that we're just not going to do it, and the NFLPA is going to have our back. That may have been true if it was close to 50-50, but I think a majority of players and a majority of the NFLPA itself are vaccinated. So that's going to be their predominant thought as we go through this. And if you're an unvaccinated player that is going to still remain on that side of the fence, again, that is your right. Like, it is, as an American, it is literally your right to have that freedom. But with that freedom, and with that freedom to make choices, we all have the freedom to judge and critique that choice, especially if it has an impact on us, because that's really what's going on, right? Because as long as there's an unvaccinated portion of this population, both within the NFL and in the country and the world at large, we run the risk of a variant mutating to the point where the effectiveness of those that are vaccinated is null. It's not going to mean nothing. Now, the Delta variant hasn't quite reached that level, but our vaccinations, CJ, you and I, our vaccinations are less effective against the Delta variant than the original variant. That's undisputable. There's nobody on this planet that will be able to convince me otherwise, because science says so. And you're not more intelligent than science, any of us, myself included. So knowing that as indisputable fact, and knowing that if there is a portion of the unvaccinated population in which a mutation occurs that becomes absolutely that there's no effectiveness of our current vaccines for that variant, then all of a sudden your body, your choice turned into my body being damaged because you didn't do what 70% of everybody else did. And then it's no longer just affecting you, it's affecting everybody. And it might undo all of the progress we've made this last year. And if that's not a realistic fear of every unvaccinated person to at least have in the back of their mind, I'm not saying that that needs to be the trigger that pushes you towards getting vaccinated as a player. But if it's not in the back of your mind that, hey, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if I am wrong here? If I'm Cole Beasley, right? If I'm Cole Beasley and I'm sitting at home right now thinking to myself, what if I am wrong? What if I'm on the wrong side of this thing? And what if a mutation occurs? What if a mutation occurs and the 70% of this country that's vaccinated in the adult population is no longer safe from this new variant that me and my fellow unvaccinated citizens have created and propagated? I got to imagine that they would feel awful. Now, if I'm wrong, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, if I'm wrong, it's not going to result in countless deaths. If the unvaccinated are wrong, though, and you make it so that everybody that's gotten vaccinated is no longer safe from a new variant, then like the whole my body, my choice thing goes out the window. And it's, I shouldn't have to do anything that I don't want to do. Yeah, I get that. But if it's a public health crisis, if your health can have an impact on my health, then I have a vested interest in what you choose to do. And I think that's what the NFL is trying to get across. And they're doing it from like a business standpoint, but from a personal perspective, I have to agree. And I know that's probably polarizing, and there's going to be a chunk of people that despise the fact that I'm saying that. But I mean, you're clearly on the opposite side of this thing if you have a problem with me saying that. And therein lies one of the biggest problems I have with all of this, specific to the NFL right now, is that they're pushing forward even more of this I don't want to get vaccinated movement, right? Because we keep saying, and I see tons of tweets about this all the time, where it's, are you really going to take medical advice from a professional athlete? No, but are you really going to say that a public image, like a public persona, someone of celebrity status, like an NFL player with the platform and the reach that they have, you want me to believe that they don't have any impact on any minds out there? Because I'll call you a liar to your face. Like, if you're going to tell me that, like,
if you're
my medical advice from them, right? If you're my 7-year-old son or your sons, and you hear your favorite player say that they're not getting vaccinated, you are impressionable, and you are going to make decisions based on that, because that's what we did as kids. I wanted Nikes because Jordan wore Nikes. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want Nikes because I saw a commercial for them. Yeah, that's part of it. But like, when people you look up to do something, you follow them. And it's the same thing with speech, right? When you talk to somebody and you pick up their mannerisms, like I say y'all all the time now. It's because my wife is from the South. It's not because I grew up my whole life saying y'all. Like
Yeah.
people have an impression on you, even if you don't mean for it to happen. It happens subconsciously. So yeah, while I'm not going to go out and ask an NFL player, hey, I've got this pain in my left shoulder. What do you think it could be? Like, I'm not going to do that. But it's also true that if an NFL player says, I'm not getting vaccinated, that there's going to be a percentage of the population that's like, my favorite player isn't getting this vaccine, so I'm not either. And that's going to happen. And maybe it will only happen with people that are impressionable. But if you want to really believe that there's not a segment of this country that is impressionable, you're delusional.
I mean,
So
yeah,
you got to be
Look
at
at
the very
look at the
least.
Jake Paul fights and how many people he gets to him.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're going to have that, if you're going to have the stance of a Cole Beasley, then you need to know that you're going to be criticized for it because you are talking to impressionable minds, and maybe not 100% of the people you're talking to, and that are seeing what you're saying, but it is a chunk, and that's enough of a chunk for me to take issue with it. And I want to give a huge shout out to Steph Diggs right now, because Steph Diggs threw out a tweet today, and it was simple. It was very simple, and it was just a matter of accountability and availability. Like accountability, availability, and that's 100% right, because like that's ultimately what the NFL is trying to get at here. Is their bottom line can be affected dramatically if there is an unvaccinated outbreak, and then everybody wants to talk about what about a vaccinated outbreak. It's not going to happen, and here's why. Right, the transmissibility of COVID-19 in the vaccinated population compared to the unvaccinated population is much different. They're not the same anymore. So let's say, just throwing out numbers, just random numbers. These aren't specific. I'm just giving round numbers so that people could follow along. Let's say a vaccinated player can only infect less than one other person if they catch COVID, but an unvaccinated player can pass it on to two different people. When I say it like that, you start to get an idea that it will spread quicker among the unvaccinated. And that has got to be the biggest fear for NFL owners right now. And I think the NFLPA too, or else the NFLPA wouldn't have agreed with this, because somebody had to sign off on this memo being released, or else we would have already heard about the NFLPA losing their minds over it. And that's not happening. It's individuals losing their minds. So shout out to the ones that realize that there's something bigger at play here.
Yeah. I mean, the way they look at it, right? Somebody's got to be held accountable. So if it's not going to be, if they're doing what they need to do and they're trying to get the people in there to give the information, and they're trying to make it vaccines available for every player, and they're going to, you know what I mean? If that's the case and they're doing that, and then they're going to lose money on top of that, they want to hold somebody accountable for the decisions that they make. And if you're going to make that decision, then you're going to lose money. And I don't, from a business standpoint, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, from a business standpoint and from a public health standpoint. Now, from an individual standpoint, is it fair? I will go on record that none of this from an individual standpoint is fair. It is not fair that there's a disease that's existing right now that's taken people from us. It's not fair that as an individual, I have to worry about my children and my wife because they're not vaccinated. As an individual, it is not fair that I have to worry about some of my favorite players because some are vaccinated and some aren't. It's not fair as an individual to have to worry about the world at large because of a small subsection that is so deep into misinformation that they believe that the only reasonable explanation is that they're right and 70% of the other people are all wrong. There's something I learned as a child. If a bunch of people say the same thing, choose that side, because everybody doesn't say the same thing and they're wrong. It's usually the minority that is wrong. Like if you got 100 people that say the sky is blue and you got 3 people that say the sky is purple, guess what? Chances are the sky is blue and 3 people are just colorblind, right? So if over 70% of your peers in the NFL are getting vaccinated, you're not, and they're educating themselves and you're educating yourselves, and all sides are doing the research, then clearly one side is doing better research and the other side is just trying to look for information that makes them feel like they're on the right side of this. But it's impossible for both sides to be wrong. Only one side is wrong. This isn't A or B. Like it's either the vaccine is more dangerous than the disease, or it's the disease is more dangerous than the vaccine. And it's not both ways. And I think that the players have a responsibility at this point to either be part of the solution. And the solution is let's get as many people vaccinated as we possibly can. And the NFL, again, is well within their rights to do that. If I refused to get vaccinated and my job decided to fire me for it, they were well within their rights. They have every right to do that. If that's one of the criteria for employment at that specific company, then that's their legal right. And I guess overall, I just hope this brings an end to this propagating of this misinformation, because that's what's happening. And I'm not saying that there's not misinformation on both sides, because there is, which is why I like to refer to myself as a leftist instead of a Democrat, because Democrats can be just as manipulative as Republicans. And I'm not here to get into this long tirade about which side is worse and which side is better. But what I'm saying is my beliefs align with Democrats in most cases. And maybe that's why I got vaccinated so easily. But to tell people that, I just want to do my research, and then to look at all of the science and to believe Tucker Carlson over a doctor, or to believe Sean Hannity over a doctor, or to believe Donald Trump over a doctor.
Yeah. And we're not talking one doctor that's saying it. This is a consensus. This is a majority of doctors that all feel.
Now, if you look, can you find a doctor that'll tell you the vaccine can kill you? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. But if you search, can you find more that say that it's dangerous than ones that'll tell you that it's safe? No, you will not. And I bet you $1 million you can't. I bet you $1 million right now, live on the air, that if you could find more doctors that tell you that the vaccine is dangerous than I can find that tell me that it's safe, I will literally give you every penny I make for the rest of my life. I'm that confident you can't do it. Like, I'm that confident. But if your goal is to just find one source that proves you right, I guarantee you can do that. So can I. But if we're going to debate about, research isn't, how do I put this? So research isn't designed, like, you're not supposed to do research just to prove yourself right. It's to educate yourself. And if you're looking for information that's going to make you feel like you're doing something right, then you're going to find it. Just like if I decide today that I want a Corvette, guess what? Because I've got that in my mind, I'm going to notice all the Corvettes driving around, and I'm going to notice more of them than I usually do because it's in my head and I'm searching for it subconsciously. And this is the same thing with the vaccine and the information and the misinformation that's out there about the vaccine. And NFL players are human beings too. And that's ultimately what I want to get at here. Like, I am no longer looking at NFL players as this as these larger than life, like, athlete. Like, they're larger than life, and they're athletes, and they're superstars, and they're celebrities. And like, I get it. But you're human beings, and you have the same kind of brain that I have, right? Your brain is made out of the same kind of matter that mine is. There's no difference.
But we're talking about people who are even more in a bubble, right? So you have to put that into perspective, right? So you know what I mean? Like, we, on one hand, view things how we view things, but we live on a day-to-day, fairly normal, right? You know what I mean? Whereas they don't really have much interaction outside of Twitter or Facebook. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you have to understand that so there's a difference, right? There's a difference between looking up to somebody for what they can do on a field, and then looking up to somebody for what they say or do off the field, right? Two totally different things, right? I can look up to a guy. I could say, oh, he's one of my favorite players because of what he does on the field. Mm-hmm. And I can also say for some of those same guys that I don't genuinely agree with everything they say off the field.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference. But when it becomes an intermingling when it becomes an intermingling where one is being affected too much by the other, and that becomes a problem to me. So like, now, like, I want to be like, oh, like, Beasley, as long as you do what you got to do and you follow guidelines, I'm fine with it. But at this point, he's said so much stuff that it's changed for me. It's made it almost like a personal thing where I don't really care what he does on the field anymore. I just don't want the locker room to get any worse. You know what I mean? So he's got to go to get that better.
Up until this week, I still admired Cole Beasley, the football player, and still had a shred of respect for Cole Beasley, the person, despite the difference of opinion. And I'm using opinion very loosely, because we got to get that opinion garbage about vaccines out of here, because there's no room for opinions in science. Like, science is science. It's not an opinion thing. In my opinion, the science says no. Like, In reality, the science says. And where I drew the line with Cole Beasley is he has been going on for weeks, right? And I want to still be able to separate the two, the football player and the person. But the bottom line is that they're one and the same. And football players are people, and all people have opinions, and all people have beliefs. So for me, what changed for me with Cole Beasley was when all of a sudden it wasn't about I need to be more informed, or I've got to do my research, or it's a 99% survival rate. Hogwash, by the way, not a true statistic. It was when he literally tweeted out that if Pfizer were to put money in his wife's name, he'd get vaccinated, and he'd tote that endorsement.
Does that not make you feel like he's doing it for other reasons than he genuinely believes that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is he doing it for followers? Is he doing it for money? Is he doing?
It tells me a lot of things. Yeah, it screams to me that you can be bought. If your belief can be bought, then it's not a belief.
I would have more respect for who you are morally as a person if you stuck with what you said.
If Pfizer
stand by it.
If Pfizer offered me $1 billion today, if Pfizer called my cell phone right now, live on the air, and said, Paul, we will give you $1 billion to walk back your stance on the COVID vaccine and to tell people that you think it's dangerous and that nobody should get vaccinated, I'd turn them down, because my belief system, my morals, my thoughts, my opinions, my feelings on any subject cannot be bought. And if it can, then they're not my beliefs. And it means that I was so flimsy in that belief to begin with, that was it really actually a belief? Or like you said, was it something else? Because when you say that you'll take money to change your opinion or to change your mind about something, you're really not that much of a believer in what it is that you're saying originally.
Exactly.
And that's where I drew the line with Cole Beasley. And that's where he lost me, is like far as respect, like as an individual is concerned. And even though I have all the respect in the world still for the player and what he can do on the field, who the person is means more to me today than who the player is. And that may not have been the case before, which is why I want to elevate the voices of people like Stephon Diggs or Marlon Humphreys, right? Of the Ravens, who has been very pro-vaccine. Or shout out to Baker Mayfield, who's showing extreme leadership by going on camera and saying, it's not just about me. It's not just about a competitive advantage by having my team vaccinated. It's about everybody at large. That's the message we need to be sending to kids. And if you're an adult that is going to be telling kids that this is dangerous, that the vaccine that has killed far less people than the virus itself, if you are someone that has that kind of platform and that's the message you're delivering, like, you don't deserve that platform. I'd rather you shut up. And I know that's probably controversial too, right? Because I have not been a proponent of the whole shut up and dribble, shut up and play ball movement, right? I think it's garbage because, like I said, people are people. But if you're going to put impressionable minds at risk with your rhetoric, you need to shut up. You just need to shut up, because now a majority of your teammates can financially lose out because of your decisions. And that's just like, I don't know. I'll let you give your final thoughts, CJ, and then I'll give some final thoughts. We'll wrap this up because I know CJ's got a softball game to get to. So we're going to end this. But CJ, last thoughts.
I think we covered it very well, honestly. And I think we went over it in good detail to the point where people can understand where we're coming from, why we have an issue with what's going on, and again, how we can try to move forward here. If he comes in and he follows guidelines and he does what he's supposed to do, fine. You know what I'm saying? But if he comes in still saying this, putting guys at risk, in my mind, he's not worth that much.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. I guess my final thought is going to be this. I know we've kind of gone off on a little bit of some tangents here, but this is a hot button issue that, like, I had high hopes wouldn't still be this. What's the word? It's created a dysfunction in society, in the NFL, and in every walk of life. And I hope that those among us that are choosing not to get vaccinated, while I respect your decision, I pray, and I'm not a very religious person, so the fact that I'm saying that is a big deal. I am going to pray that your decision doesn't cost all of us in the long run. I pray that you end up right and I end up wrong, because if I have egg on my face, at least there's not a bunch of people dead because of it. And like, that's where I'm hoping that I'm wrong at this point, but I feel so strongly that I'm not, because the science backs me up, and the science does not back up unvaccinated people. The only thing backing up unvaccinated people is propaganda and misinformation. And I know that they're going to throw that back at me and tell me that I'm a sheep and I've been peer pressured into getting a vaccine. And would you believe everything that they tell you? We can't both be right. Okay. One of us are wrong. And I really sincerely hope that I'm wrong, but the science just isn't there to even make me feel like me being wrong in this instance is a possibility. So when you re-educate yourself, I advise you to do this. And this is one human being to another, because I care about all human beings, all human beings. If you are on the fence about COVID-19 vaccines, if you're an NFL player on the fence about the COVID-19 vaccine, if you're an NFL player on the fence about the COVID-19 vaccine, and you are claiming that you've done your research, I want you to go back and do more research. And this is what I want you to do this time. Try to prove yourself wrong. And if you find yourself unable to prove yourself wrong, then maybe there's some validity to the statements you make. But start looking for information that proves you wrong, and you will be surprised at what you find. I'm saying this from experience, because every single thing that I've come to know and believe about COVID-19 and the vaccine, I tried to prove every single piece of it wrong before I allowed myself to believe it. And I couldn't find the information to prove it wrong. And that's how I ended up where I'm at. And that is how research works. That is how you educate yourself. So I advise everybody to do the same. To the NFL players that have gotten vaccinated, talk to your peers. We got to stop acting like this is something we can't speak on. We have to stop acting like it's an issue that just is completely off limits. We can't do that. We owe it to each other, and we owe it to the world, and we owe it to humanity to have tough conversations about this, about social justice, about all of it. And I will beat on every drum. I will jump on board every movement if it means the betterment of people. And I expect people to do the same for this. Educate yourselves. Stop acting like you're willing to walk away from tens of millions of dollars for something that is going to have less of an effect on you than the virus. And if you don't think the virus can hurt you, ask Tommy Sweeney. Ask countless players in the NFL that have had an impact from COVID-19, either themselves or a loved one. Stop acting like you are the end all be all of knowledge in regards to this, and allow yourself room in your brain to accept additional information and to think to yourself, maybe, just maybe, I'm the one who's being misled, because one side is being misled and one side's not. Don't be on the wrong side of this thing, because I promise you, if it gets bad and you are on that side, the world will look at you in a very poor light for the rest of your existence. And I don't want that for anybody. So please, do actual research. If you're going to spout off at the mouth, know what you're talking about. Don't be bought. Don't let your beliefs be bought. Be kind to each other. Let's have these conversations. Even if they end up aggravating one another, we have to have them. My Twitter is right there, @officially PDubs. Tweet at me. I'll get into back and forth with people. I don't mind. I will provide you with information. You can provide me with information. If you could prove some of the things that I believe wrong, I welcome it. And I hope you welcome it too, because that's what I'll try to do. Cole Beasley, delete your Twitter. Seriously, just please delete your Twitter. Stefan, teach him how to tweet. I don't know. We're gonna wrap this up, though. I'm sure this isn't the last we're gonna be discussing this in the off season or in the season. Yeah. But this was just too big of a deal to not talk about. And I know my emotions started getting a little wonky there, and because I have a lot of beliefs about this. And you know, if you're not this convicted in your beliefs, then you could be bought by a company like Pfizer. Cole Beasley, why don't you take Mark Cuban's offer? I'll even pitch in $50. I'll throw you $50. Mm-hmm. Go get the damn vaccine and protect your teammates. All right. On that note,
all right, guys,
this has been the Game Day 716 podcast. I have been your host, Paul, aka PDubs. This has been
GamedayCJ.
And until next time, stay safe, be kind to each other, help each other, talk to each other. Let's get through this together. We don't all have to agree to be able to succeed. That's the great thing about humanity, right? We don't all have to be rowing the same direction. Like, we can make it work if we're just open to each other. So please do that. Stay safe. And until next time, this is Game Day 716 and get vaccinated. Jeez. Bye.